Hey friends, it's Melvin. Thanks for tuning into this episode. Here's just a few quick things I wanted to notify you guys about before we get started. First up, very soon, new episodes will be releasing Wednesday mornings rather than Tuesday. So don't panic if you don't see a new episode on Tuesday. Just wait a little longer and you'll see it in your feed. Second, we've introduced a mailbag. Check those show notes and toward the bottom you'll see a mailbag link. You'll then be able to text us any questions you might have about movies, the movie industry, or any movie/Christian related questions you might have. Then we'll respond in a future episode, so send us your questions now. Up next, Patreon polls, which are available to Patreon supporters at the $3 tier or higher, have been updated. Supporters can now suggest films or shows to be reviewed at the end of each month. The two most liked submissions will become the options for the Patreon poll, so if you want to hear us talk about your favorite movie or show, join our Patreon and start campaigning. And lastly, whether you're a new or longtime listener, please consider writing a review or rating the Cinematic Doctrine podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Apart from financially supporting on Patreon, these are the two most helpful ways to support the show. And that's it. Enjoy the episode. Hi, my name is Melvin, and marry Nick Cage, miss. Welcome to Cinematic Doctrine, a Christian podcast service that seeks to encourage and equip Christians to engage and reform the culture of cinema. In this episode, Daniel and I talk about Dimitri Logothetis' Jiu Jitsu. October saw the release of this wild martial arts trailer about Nicolas Cage teaching a warrior fighter how to fight an alien. That alone set Twitter aflame, and even Cinematic Doctrine's website saw increased traffic from our write-up on the website. Jiu Jitsu looked crazy fun. People punching and kicking to stop an honorable alien warrior? Sign us up. And then we watched it. And boy, Daniel and I sure have some thoughts. We're no stranger to camp, let alone Nicolas Cage camp, but Jiu Jitsu's overly serious and convoluted plotline leaves a lot to be desired. From the get-go, before we even get the chance to give you logistics, Daniel and I air out some grievances about the film with tangible confusion. Then, soon after, we jump right into decrypting the bizarre choices behind the filmmaking, from first-person martial arts to a camera acting like a fidget-spinner. There's a lot going on in Jiu Jitsu that was not expected. Afterward, stick around for some fun trivia regarding Nicolas Cage's martial arts training, Dimitri Logothetis' run-in with Martin Scorsese, and how Jiu Jitsu was based on a comic book. Sort of. Without further ado, here's our discussion on Jiu Jitsu.
Why Jiu Jitsu, Melvin? Why did you really want me on the show to talk about this?
Well, because I knew it was something you were going to like. Even if you didn't like it, wrong. I knew it was something that you would like.
That's going to be one of the frustrating things talking about it, is this is definitely one of those movies that I really wanted to like more than I physically could, because it's, I mean, not to completely spoil the whole episode up front, but which is a shame, because it's like, I feel like the premise has a lot of potential as far as like an action movie goes, but I mean, we'll get into that. So I mean, what's the show been like while I've gone? Because I haven't listened to a single second of the show since I stopped being on it.
Helping us with our metrics. Love it.
Yeah. Well, you know, who wants to remember, you know?
Yeah. It's been good. Carter's been a good host. We've been having good balances back and forth and stuff. And then even we've been able to have a couple trailer talks that were pretty decent. I've heard some good feedback regarding our monthly movie news going really well. And I think that's also behind the scenes, listener. We don't just appear on show and just start talking. We do have a format, and that format keeps evolving. Longtime listeners would definitely know that, because our show is very different than it used to be. And our monthly movie news format, I think, has been really improved. And so I think just in general, you know, you taking a break has done nothing but help our show. So, you know, now that you're coming back, I'm just a little worried. That's all. But, you know, it's in God's hands.
That's usually how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. And what a time to come back, right? Jiu Jitsu, man. This is not even Mank. Mank came out the same day.
Oh, did it? What are we doing?
I think Mank literally dropped yesterday. There was something else that came out yesterday that I was like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. And it was like something else that was like a November 20 release that was going to be good. I can't remember what it was.
Yesterday was the day for just nonsense news. where they announced they're doing Black Panther 2 in 2021,
That early?
which seems
Wow.
a little soon. um,
Jeez.
but yeah, usually how it goes is the minute I get out of the way, things usually improve. That's one thing I've learned in my life is once the hindrance is gone, once the weak link has been removed, things improve.
Or even like a blister, you show up after the work's done.
Yeah.
So it's like all the hard stuff has happened in the last 2 months and 2 or 3 months. And then you're like, hey guys, how's it going? I'm ready to work again. We're over here sweating and bleeding. Like,
what's the new
okay.
format? Is the new format kind of what we were talking about before I left? Where
We just have I think we have the episode titles and show notes are mostly the same, but there's a much stricter byline behind the scenes in formatting how we go into discussion. So listener, you might recall, and you may not have noticed it directly, but your brain noticed it, that our last two movie news is we would basically say like, all right, we're going to talk about theaters. And then we were like, we need to think of topics and discussion topics and news stories that kind of go in line with theaters.
Okay.
And then the next movie news, so the last one we just did, was we talked about theaters and then transitioning to streaming, because ultimately that topic was more about distribution. And so then the upcoming movie news, who knows what it'll be, but it'll probably be something regarding streaming specifically, because there's been a lot of, 2020 has garnered a lot of interesting streaming information, even including Jiu Jitsu itself. I mean, there's a lot of movies that are being watched now, maybe not Jiu Jitsu because metrics don't look very good, but there's a lot of movies that are getting seen because they're going straight to PVOD. And everyone has VUDU and everyone has Prime and everyone has this. So it's like, why not? I'd like Freaky was a movie that probably wouldn't get a lot of. Freaky was the Vince Vaughn movie, the serial killer Vince Vaughn movie where a dagger made some switch bodies with a teenage girl. And that movie, the premise alone is awesome. I'm like, all right, I gotta see that.
I really want to see that. Yeah.
But like, I think it's getting more attention because it's a PVOD film where like for $6 you can just rent it and watch it and invite your friends over, or maybe not now because COVID 2 is back. COVID 2 Electric Boogaloo, The Reckoning, The Squeakquel. So it's no one's going over, but that might be our byline moving forward for the next one. And so I don't know if, yeah, your brain noticed it is what I'm saying. And so I think that's helped the show. But let's see how Jiu Jitsu handles with our format for movie discussions, because this do we even care about the fact that we don't talk spoilers in the beginning? Like, it doesn't really. Oh, we can't talk about that time he punched the other guy.
There is. So first off, up front, I'm just gonna admit this up front. I use the phrase up front too many times, but like just to really get this out of the way right now.
Before we give details on even this film, we haven't even told you what this film's about.
Well, yeah, I just want to say, I want to preemptively apologize to listeners in you, Melvin, because I really had trouble following this movie, and it's not because it's like a complicated movie, which is what's really frustrating, is that if you were to sit down and write out the plot, it is really simple. But the way it's conveyed is so confusing to me that I worry that in my head, there's only one thing to spoil, really, as far as the movie goes.
Yes.
But I'm worried there's a bunch of other details that I just don't understand. As far as my triumphant return to the show, I'm worried this is not just a bad movie to come back on, but it's going to be a bad performance, because I just don't remember. I started taking notes during this movie, which I never do. I never have to do that. Right, to have a pretty good memory as far as like plot and characters and just like what happens and themes. This movie, I like pulled out my phone. I was like writing down like, okay, character said this, which means this. And so I was just like trying to put the pieces together, because there's a ton of exposition for the first half of this movie repeated over and over again. It's like the same exposition over and over again. And I literally was,
and then it turns into a different movie.
Yes. And I was just like, am I just misremembering details? Did this conversation already happen? So up front, we're probably going to spoil this movie, but I'm guessing
on accident
and on purpose, because there's one really important thing that we just have to talk about at some point in the movie. But like, I'm guessing if you were like Nick Cage's Jiu Jitsu, yes, you're not somebody who's going to be overly concerned about like anything other than punching and kicking and some weird performances. So I'm comfortable with that for this episode. If you were, Melvin,
We're gonna try our best to stick to
we'll
a
try
format.
our
So
best.
this is
We'll
this is a
try our
tough one.
best to
This
not
is the
do
movie
that,
that
but-
broke the format, just like somebody punching a block of wood. This has broken it. So, Daniel, why don't you get us started? Who directed this, wrote this, starring, all that jazz? It doesn't even really matter, but we should pay our respects. Press F to pay our respects.
Fair respects to the wonderful artist who made this movie. So Jiu Jitsu is directed by Dimitri Logothetis. Apologies to his name. It's written by him and Jim McGrath. They also wrote the comic together, but I get the impression that they wrote a comic so they can make a movie off of it, and it wasn't. They decided to make a great comic into a movie. This movie stars Nicolas Cage, who you may know from YouTube compilations, as well as National Treasure, Con Air, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Kiss of the Vampire, a bunch of really great films. Alain Moussi is the actual lead of this film, and he is most notable from the Kickboxer remake films, as well as, I believe, some recent Street Fighter films. Frank Grillo, who you may know as Crossbones in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as the lead in some of the recent Purge movies in this, alongside Tony Jaa from Furious 7, the Ong Bak series, the upcoming Monster Hunter movie, which I keep forgetting is going to be made.
And is still technically going into theaters,
It's
if you didn't know.
Christmas Day, apparently. So
it's weird.
Imagine it's Christmas, and rather than stay home for the pandemic, you decide to risk your life to see Monster Hunter.
Or rather, you risk your life to see Monster Hunter instead of Wonder Woman. Even though you could just stay home and watch Wonder Woman.
For free on HBO Max.
Which, by the way, if everybody who listened to that last monthly movie news, I called that. I said they are going to put it on streaming, and the data they're going to look for is who talks about Soul or Wonder Woman on Twitter, and which one gets more attention. I called it. This is the way of the future.
Mister, we need to stick to the format, interrupting to brag about a prediction he made.
Of course. Just calling it.
I did a poll on our Twitter, and a majority of people said that they would subscribe to HBO Max to see Wonder Woman, but it was actually surprisingly narrow. A lot of people said they go to theater to see it, so we'll see. But this movie also has JuJu Chan, who you may know from Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Sword of Destiny, a lot of Hong Kong films. Marie Avgeropoulos, Maria
Avgeropoulos.
Yeah. Who is actually in the Percy Jackson film. She's in 50. No, it's okay. She's in The 100, I also believe. And Rick Yune, who is in Elite Battle Angel, Olympus Has Fallen. So this movie has a surprisingly dense cast as far as name actors. It also has Crabman from My Name is Earl, who is not listed on Wikipedia or in most press releases, but he's actually in a ton of this movie. Plot synopsis: every 6 years, an ancient order of jiu-jitsu fighters joins forces to battle a vicious race of alien invaders called the Brax. But when a celebrated war hero goes down in defeat, the fate of the planet and mankind hangs in the balance.
So that's, of course, the synopsis that they give you.
Synopsis. And I'm just going to immediately up front, before getting to anything else, none of them do jiu-jitsu. One guy does jiu-jitsu.
Hey,
but continue.
There's like 2 or 3 scenes where they do jiu-jitsu.
I wrote down every single instance of jiu-jitsu in the movie because I'm a weirdo.
There was like 3 scenes.
Yes.
I think there were 3 scenes for like 3 seconds in total runtime.
It's under 30 seconds of jiu-jitsu in this movie. And one of them is a guy who is part of the Gracie family. So that was weird.
It would have been cool to see more. But oh well. Because jiu-jitsu is tense. Anyways.
It is very tense.
So our MPA rating for this film is rated R for violence throughout, which is not a surprise. But for content awareness, you just have constant fighting. Again, no surprise. There's some gore regarding some injuries. One scene at the end is fairly graphic, I guess, but even just sort of the nonchalant way I describe it is like it's not really particularly vile, but the rated R, I think, fits. There's some lingering violence in terms of the camera sort of focuses on people. There's like one scene where a character is dying, but it's like they've already died, and then like the alien like kills them again and then like kills them again. And at some point it's like, this doesn't feel appropriate. Like this feels a little too ogling of somebody getting killed, which was really strange.
Yeah.
So that typically can make me uncomfortable in a movie even if it's not smart enough to do that. I don't know if that makes sense to people listening. They're like, well then how is it smart enough to just like kill over and over, but it is possible. And then there's like topless men, but you expected that when you're watching a karate film where people are like punching and kicking. So
yeah.
But that's still something to be aware of.
I will say though, I'm not sure if it's necessarily the scene keeps going as much as the movie. Sometimes I don't know if they want to pad the runtime. We'll just have like replays of things. So there'd be moments where like somebody would get hit, and then they would just cut to a different cut of that same person getting hit the same way again.
Yeah.
So some scenes happen more than once because they're playing them over and over again.
And some scenes could have just been cut from the movie, but oh well. Did not have to be an hour and 40 minutes.
No. This could have been a YouTube short, but we'll get into that. But yeah, so if you like what you've heard so far, or you like previous episodes, please leave a review on iTunes, Podchaser, or wherever you listen. Follow our social media, including our Facebook page. We're on Twitter at
Cinedoctrine.
At Cinedoctrine, CINEDOCTRINE. We are almost at 100 Twitter followers. The 100th Twitter follower will get something special, I promise.
Cute.
We're also on Instagram. I'm not saying what it is, but it'll be special. And join our Facebook group titled Cinematic Doctrine Group. If you're joining from the podcast, please just let us know that's where you found out about us. Also, check out our other shows under the same feed, Trailer Talk and Monthly Movie News, our movie culture, content in general. Also, check out our website, cinematicdoctrine.com, where in addition to episodes, you also have written content, including essays from Melvin as well as other contributors. And also support us on Patreon for as low as just $3 a month. You gain access to exclusive voting privileges for movies we review in the future and discuss. You also get our exclusive show, The Pre-Show, which is like a free-form movie conversation about Christianity as well, and sometimes just catching up with me, with Melvin. So I think that covers it. Do we have any other projects in the fire?
Look forward to something on Quibi, because I'm trying to binge Quibi stuff before it dies. So.
You should do like a multi-episode series just reviewing everything that's on Quibi.
I have some ideas. I have a lot of really interesting ideas. I think it'll especially be interesting to talk about Quibi shows to somebody who doesn't know anything about Quibi or the shows. So look forward to something. My brain's turning.
The best follow-up episode would be if you announced that you're the guy who bought Quibi's back library.
Open up a PayPal. Please support this PayPal. I'm buying Quibi.
I really hope you buy it. Stupid sentence. It'd be great if you buy it or someone other than like some like weird sketchy like group that just buys content. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just to distribute it.
Yeah. Or even Disney or somebody who at least would like put it on something that we would have.
YouTube.
Yeah. So Melvin, what are your general thoughts on 2020's best film, Jiu Jitsu?
Oh man, this movie, I think the thing that made this the most enjoyable is that so I hate the fish out of water trope. I hate the amnesiac trope.
Really? Well, I hate amnesia, but
I really don't like those tropes. And the reason I hate it is typically it's used for writers and directors to exploit women. They have like this fish out of water idea, and then they're like, "Oh, what's a t-shirt?" And then they're just like busty, and you're like, "This is so dumb." Yeah, that's a great use of spending money to ask an actor to do that while you're filming them. That's not immoral. And they not only can do that, but even in like, so one of the reasons I hate watching anime is it's used so much, and it does the exact same thing.
Okay.
It's very frustrating. But I liked this movie because they did that trope, but with a really big buff guy. And then they didn't exploit him. He just looks around and doesn't do anything the whole movie. There's no emotions. There are so many cuts where like somebody does something and then they give him a reaction shot. And like, he just looks like he's driving. Like, you know, like people who drive are expressionless. And that's exactly what he looked like.
So
it's so good.
So at first I was confused about your comment about fish out of water because I was like, I don't remember that in Thor, the first movie or whatever, or the King and Connecticut Yankee, King Arthur's Court. Then I was like, oh yeah, an anime that is definitely a constant trope as far as portal fantasy and fish out of water.
They'll use fish out of water stuff just to do sexual stuff because they're like, if they're fish out of waters, they can shoot lasers from their eyes and they're professional taekwondo fighters, but they just can't pick out the right clothing.
Yeah.
Shame.
Not in Inuyasha, Rising of a Shield Hero, or The Devil is a Part-Timer, aka one of the funniest, cutest shows ever. But it's actually, I was recently reading a discussion in Fantasy Board where a lot of people hate the fish out of water portal fantasy trope as well, but more because they feel that it's a cheap shortcut for world building exposition, where you don't have to like really design a whole world. You just have to write enough stuff for your protagonist to absorb. So you don't have to bother with establishing a world. You can just take a character, audience insert character, have them there. So it's an easy person for people just to shout information at.
Right.
We're like, don't you know the king is blah blah blah, and we're cursed by blah blah blah. And then also like you don't really have to worry about the backstory of the world, where you can just have little bits and pieces for the character to learn. And so as one person pointed out, it's like that's completely unnecessary. Like if you really want to, you could just have a fantasy story in this world without bothering with this audience point of view character in the first place. You can even do the same chosen hero trope.
Yeah.
But to reveal my hand a little bit here, why did this character have amnesia? I did not understand the entire movie. I was like, where did this guy come from?
Yeah, like that character, he starts the film. So the lead character starts the film like having hit his head, and then he has amnesia. But then like you already know the premise of the movie, which is like they have to fight this creature. And so the first 30-40 minutes are like him learning like I have to go fight this creature. So he's not even an effective audience stand-in because we know more than he does immediately. It doesn't make any sense.
Bizarre. So yeah, the premise of we begin with the movie with our character currently unnamed. The actor's Alain Moussi, who is best known. He's actually he plays Batman. I don't know if you know this about him, but in the DC live action show Titans, which that is an episode for another day. We really need to talk about that show sometime because it's very weird. They don't have Batman in the show because DC's really weird about who gets to have Batman, but Bruce Wayne is in the show. And when they have flashbacks to when he's Batman, they have this guy in the bat suit, but they don't show his face doing all the Batman things, which is a great use for him because as far as facial expressions and actual acting goes, Mr. Alain Moussi is not great at it, but he wakes up being rescued by a fisherman, and he gets taken to a military base for reasons I still don't understand. And then where he's then interrogated, like, who are you? What are you doing? And he doesn't know. But the people interrogating him also don't explain. So they're entirely pointless scenes where he's just being yelled at. And then from there, the movie kind of gets going when Tony Jaa shows to rescue him. And so, so the first half of the movie is completely pointless, where you just don't learn any information. Neither does the character. And it's just bad. So I don't know if we're going too far off the rails here, but overall, did you like the movie?
No, I didn't. I really was just like kind of bored with it. And at some point, I think I enjoyed it, even though it was bizarre for the first half, because I was like, I mean, what am I expecting? You know, I came here to watch people fight and kick, and I think that's pretty neat. But even then, I didn't find that it was like shot well. Yeah, right. I just think they're neat. I didn't think it was shot well enough for me to enjoy a lot of the fighting. And at some point, when it never really improved, it became a bit tiresome and cumbersome, where I was like, I should just put on the raid if I want to watch this happen. And then at some point during the last 10 minutes of the movie, I was incapable of actually watching the movie. Like my mind kept going to other subjects, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm not even thinking about the movie, and I just missed like what was happening. And I knew it was only punching and kicking, so I'm not missing like dialogue or important plot world based, like I'm not learning like the theme or message of the movie here, but I don't know what happened. So I was like, I want to focus and just at least like give it its fair share. I'm almost done. I know that this is like the final fight. Let me enjoy it. But then my brain immediately jumped to something else. And so I was trying to focus on the movie, but I was just so inundated with all these punches and kicking and like wishing noises, and to the point where my body was just forcing me to say stop. It was like the equivalent of like if you went running for a really long time, your body stops being capable of running, but you might try and push yourself. And so now you're at that mental stage of fighting your body to keep going. That's what this movie turned into. Never experienced that before. And it was bad because it was boring. And I was like, I'm not even going to get rewarded for persevering here. So I don't like sounding mean when I'm talking about not liking something, but like, I don't know how else to describe what this movie turned into for me. And that's what it turned into. It was really strange. So like, I don't even know like how to describe, like I enjoyed that it looked like people were having fun. That's what this looked like, was people just having fun doing their martial arts, but in costumes and being filmed doing it. And I think that's exciting.
It looked like Nick Cage is having fun. I don't know if everyone else had fun.
Who knows? Yeah, Nick Cage just loves being in movies, so I know that he was having a good time, but That was it. So no, I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with the movie. So if you've listened to any episode I've ever been on, I have long stated my love for martial arts, and I love action movies. And I love movies with lots of martial arts fighting. So in that regard, the movie is okay. Like there isn't there's movies like this. There's the saving grace of a movie with almost non-existent plot can be if it's used effectively as a framework for action scenes,
or even like visuals, because there are some movies that are just like straight visuals, and people like there's nothing to this, there's no substance, and it's like the visuals are the substance. And so like in this movie, at the end of the day, I would have been comfortable stepping away going, the martial arts is the substance. Like that, if Joaquin Phoenix can have a vehicle to just perform in a movie and get an Oscar for it, then I don't know why I can't have a vehicle of a movie that's just straight martial arts the whole time. So I'm totally fine with that. But then like it needs to succeed as a vehicle. It needs to have tread on its tires. It's got to have gas in there, or else it's not going anywhere. And I'm going to be tired for an hour and 48 minutes. And that's where it kind of landed.
This is part of why I think I think there should be an Oscar for stunts. And I also think there should be some sort of award like Oscar for fight choreography and that sort of thing. Because it's a deceptively difficult art to pull off. Like if you've ever watched the behind the scenes for really great martial arts films, you'll see there's a lot of love and care put into like really tightly choreographing and planning out these scenes.
Yeah.
Or even some of the old Hong Kong movies where there's opposite, where they didn't have a lot of time to plan out fight scenes, so they just had to really get them done like quickly and in one like as few takes as possible, which caused for some really awesome stuff to be done. So like take just like The Raid, for example. The actual plot of that movie, really simple, and actually kind of is underrated in how nonsensical it kind of is. Where like I don't know if anyone listening to this has ever seen The Raid, but there's like plot twists in that movie that come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because you're so captivated by what you're seeing on screen that you don't notice. But in this, the fight scenes are just okay. Like, and they're very samey, and every attempt to try and spice them up is actually kind of a terrible idea.
Like, do you remember when they show a scene that is sort of like when the alien show like first appeared? And for some reason, the cameraman decided I'm gonna put my camera on a yo-yo, and it's gonna do a lot of spinning and moving up and down. And I was like, I can't look at the screen anymore. This is gonna make me sick.
Yes, and I did not understand that at all.
Like, was it some sort of like artistic choice because the portal looked like circles, and so they're like, let's make the camera do circles, but it's like I don't want to do circles because I'm gonna throw up.
There are multiple strange decisions as far as what to do with the camera in this movie. There's the first Predator scene where everyone's getting shot at by the alien, where it suddenly just hyper focuses on different characters' faces as they scream, which was just nauseating.
Right. And so there's like they're wearing harnesses that hold the camera, and I'm pretty sure there's one scene where the one character, I'm scrolling up to get her name and I'm not going to get it right, Marie Avgeropoulos. I'm so sorry, honey, if you're listening to this and I'm getting your name wrong. But it's like there's the last shot of this like harness scene. She has her arms tucked in really tight, but she's supposed to be running, and I'm like, oh no, is the harness like falling off? Like she's now having to perform while holding the harness, but like has to do it discreetly. And like, what was the point of that? It doesn't.
I don't know why in the first there's a really great action scene early on. The first time you see Tony Jaa, who he gets enough time to shine. I obviously will always want more of him in movies, but he's this great Muay Thai fighter who also does great, like kind of a lot of American directors, when they don't know what to do with this guy, for some reason they turn him into like a parkour guy, which I never quite understand, where he does just a lot of running around and doing flips. But he does some of that. But then he rescues Alain Moussi from the military guys. And for parts of the scene, they switch to a first person view, which is,
but then sometimes they don't,
but sometimes it's not. And I don't like, first off, first person martial arts is a stupid idea because it looks like you just see two arms coming from the sides of the camera and it looks bad.
And it's got to be a really wide lens if you want to even try it.
And Hardcore Henry had the good sense to focus on him shooting guns because that looked a lot better in first person than punching and kicking. But then, sometimes the camera will just stop moving and then he'll move in front of the camera. So I don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
And it stays the same aspect ratio. It's like 1:2, so it's super wide. So if he's punching, like his arms aren't even in frame anyway. And I was like, why didn't they just like artistically, quote unquote, switch to another, like a bigger aspect ratio so I could see more? And it was just, yeah, man. There's a lot of choices in this movie that confound me. I don't understand.
If you're just an action movie fan, if you're just somebody who likes watching people fight and you like some good fight choreography, this is one of those movies where your best bet is just to go on YouTube and type in Jiu Jitsu best fights and watch the 15 to 20 minutes that someone will post where they just supercut all the best scenes in the movie.
Rather, you search that and you find an actual Jiu Jitsu fight and you're like, hey, that's actually more entertaining than the scene in the movie.
I'll just get this out of the way. So I'm sure people are like, several different people pointing this out, where there is an actual Jiu Jitsu in this movie. In this movie, the Jiu Jitsu is the name of the person who will fight this alien creature called Brax. Or I don't know if it's the name of the race of aliens or if that's just his name. They just call him Brax. So it's not a term for a type of martial art they do in the movie. It's just it's like a chosen one kind of thing, if I'm understanding correctly. Which is weird because there's multiple different other martial arts disciplines on display. You have Muay Thai, you have karate, you have Eskrima, everything but Jiu-Jitsu pretty much. And so if it sounds like we're kind of jumping around a lot, it's because the plot is in two parts. There is this first 40-minute chunk of the movie where you don't know what's happening, you don't know why anyone's around. In order, what happens is our main character is washed up and found. He gets interrogated by military characters who are like, who are you? What are you doing? And they have some great exposition-y lines like, as you know, there's lots of uranium up there, things like that.
Yeah.
He gets rescued by Tony Jaa, where he gets taken. All these different people are like, don't you remember Jake? They say the name Jake like 15 times in a row, which is really funny.
It's a very white person name.
Yeah. Another action scene breaks out with military guys. He gets taken back to the military base and put in the same chair where he's once again getting interrogated.
The chair that was destroyed.
Yes.
Remember? There's a fighting scene where like the chair is obliterated by people getting thrown into it.
He throws a guy through the chair. And then he's back in that chair.
Like two dudes. And then, that's just back to normal.
And then there's another scene where then all the military guys are getting predatored, where the Brack shows up and fights everyone. And then then everyone runs away. And then you finally meet Nicolas Cage 39 minutes into the movie. I clocked it. And then he tells them, like, you gotta do some important stuff. And then they get together, and then all these other characters meet up, and then the movie starts. Because they finally explain what the plot of the movie is, which is this guy needs to fight 9 warriors. And then if he doesn't, he'll destroy the world. Or he'll kill you. So you need to fight him. If you don't fight him, he'll destroy the world. Because he just really likes to fight. Did you Okay, can you explain to me what the premise of this movie is? Because my understanding is Brax is a creature and they like to come to Earth to fight the best warriors, which is hilarious because these are not the best warriors. These are just 9 people that agreed to be in this movie. And so they roughly gave them approximations of different fighting styles. Like Frank Grillo is barely in the movie, but he fights with knives. You get a guy with a bow staff who is an actual kickboxing champion, I think. And so he fights them because he likes to fight people. And then if he beats them, he just leaves and comes back.
It's running on Dragon Ball logic, where like Cell has the Cell games where it's like, I'm going to come here and I'm going to destroy the whole world. But if you can send your best fighters, we'll fight each other. And by the way, I'll go make the fighting ring, which Cell literally does. He just finds like a field and then creates a ring. And then they do the Cell games. But the thing is, it doesn't have the charisma of Dragon Ball, where Cell is a really fun character because he's kind of terrifying. And then even like all of your Z fighters from Goku down to like, man, even Mr. Satan are just like so fun. He's not even called Mr. Satan in the US. They changed his name because they're like, that's too demonic.
You can't have a kid show with a character named Mr. Satan.
The irony too is that he's called Mr. Satan and he's a massive capitalist. So I think Akira Toriyama is hilariously on the nose, even when he's like doing it for the wrong reasons. Cause because Mr. Popo is absolutely a racist character in that series.
There's no getting around that.
There's just no way to avoid that. And so obviously him being like Japanese and therefore not liking the US makes total sense that the character named Mr. Satan is a capitalist and also a loser. But all of those characters are very fun. So that's why the Cell games are exciting. That's why the premise of someone who wants to destroy the world, who came from the future, creating a ring and saying, I'll just fight random people first and then kill you, works.
Yeah.
But like this doesn't have any character. The alien is cool until it shows like his face kind of for some reason.
He looks like the guy in Tron. I couldn't get past it. He looks like the giant thing in Tron. Yeah.
They're putty man. So it's just weird. So there's just like choices that just strip the charisma away because this movie is played really seriously for some reason.
Which is so strange. Yeah. So this premise, like I said, it could be a great frame to hang an action movie on, where you could get a distinct villain who for some reason his alien race is really good at martial arts, except when he doesn't care about honor and just shoots shurikens out of his like gauntlets. Like that's the thing I didn't understand. Like he's an alien that cares about honor and fighting until he decides to just shoot everyone.
He shoots people, he has shuriken, he has armor that heals him. I was like, if he wants to do like an honorable fight, why is he wearing like an Iron Man suit? What's going on? I mean, at least like in Dragon Ball, all of the villains have the decency to just fight hand to hand and then shoot lasers, I guess, from their hands. But still, like, it just doesn't make any sense.
Just like the true ending of this movie would have been, and this is not what they do, where like at the end, the main character earns the guy's respect. So the alien takes off his armor and decides to have like a true mano-a-mano combat thing, which they don't do in this movie. They do something different. But like the best version of this movie would have been kind of similar to do you ever see the movie Predators, which is the third Predator movie?
Yeah, it's pretty decent.
This movie really reminded me of that like a lot. Yeah, in Predators, they have all the characters are very distinct. They all have very specific skills, all very different like backstories and motivations. And the Predator just wants to test himself in combat. So you don't have this convoluted aliens want to destroy the world story. Yeah, there's not deep lore. It's just the Predators brought them here because they just want to fight him to train. And then you get like, they even do this same kendo scene from Predators with Nicolas Cage in this movie. But so you could have had a movie where you have different characters with decidedly different fighting styles or skills. And you get like a Game of Death style gauntlet where like they all each fight the alien. And you have a different scene. You can do different things with the cinematography, the music, the choreography. And you could have had, if you just had like a series of all decent fight scenes that are all unique and fun, and then like the main character could like see his friends getting killed, and that gives him the courage to fight back. Maybe he has to learn to not be a coward, but to stand up to the alien. And the end of the movie could be him avenging his friends' deaths, defending the world, and he learns and he gains the alien's respect by like being the best fighter that Earth has to offer. The problem is, A, you need to hire an actual great cast of people to do that, which they only got 3 or 4 good actors in it. And B, that takes a lot of work. And they don't have time to choreograph 9 different action scenes with distinct styles. They just do the same action scene over and over again. And instead they paradoxically, and if you could see right now, I'm just like crushing my face in my hands because I'm trying to understand. It's just, they somehow make the plot really complicated despite there not being a lot of plot to complicate. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It probably would have been improved if like he never had amnesia and the whole film was sort of building up to like this fight's going to happen and it's going to be hard, because then they could build tension.
No.
Yeah, that's right. That's not how it works. But like, I don't think it's wrong to like, we've already name dropped The Raid, so I don't mind name dropping John Wick, but like John Wick works because they build tension for John Wick of like, this is a guy, this is the boogeyman. You don't kill John Wick's dog because he's a guy who we're glad retired because he was so frightening. And so then when it gets to the point that he's killing people in the film for the sake of avenging his dog, of which everybody wishes they could do if somebody kills your dog, like you're actually kind of terrified of John Wick. Like I remember watching it the last time I watched it, I was like, this is a horror movie where you're watching the villain kill people. Like John Wick is the bad guy, even though he's doing like not like I mean not the right thing, but nobody's watching John Wick for morals. But like the way they handle it is like he's petrifying and they build it up and then they let him loose. And so like when he's in the nightclub, you're like, this is the most terrifying thriller movie I've ever seen. And they just don't do that with this movie. And they have to play catch up because they gave their lead actor amnesia when he could have been just building up to like the very real cowardice anyone would have when you're building up a villain.
Right.
They didn't, I don't know. It's very frustrating. So all that to say is like, there is one spoiler in this movie that we think that, well, it's just entertaining to get into. So
your overall early thoughts are just a flat negative, essentially.
Yeah, it's not really worth watching. You'll have more fun just picking up something off YouTube.
The mild seal of approval I'll give is if you want to like get this movie, if you can get it real cheap and then just fast forward through every scene that doesn't involve fighting, that's the only way to enjoy it. Or scenes with Nick Cage in them, but like it's like 70 minutes of this movie is terrible, so I'll leave it at that. But first bit of trivia, so obviously this movie is filled with a lot of real life martial artists. However, one that you might not expect is a real life martial artist is actually Nicolas Cage himself, who is a black belt in Jiu Jitsu, trained under Royce Gracie, who is obviously one of the members of the legendary Gracie family, who is the UFC 1, 2, and 4 champion. Logothetis, in an interview with Inverse, is quoted as saying that because of Nicolas Cage's previous martial arts knowledge, Cage likely did about 80% of his stunts. A double was used in places where Cage would be at risk of injury, which makes sense because that's an insurance thing.
And he is a lot. I mean, he's probably the oldest actor in the film.
Yeah, he
still has that Mandy weight too.
Yeah,
because so it's not like he could do a whole lot, but no one's going to complain that he's not a physical actor. He's very physical. So It makes total sense that he did a lot of his stuff.
That actually answers one of my questions. I was curious as to how much of this movie was done with the stunt double for Nicolas Cage, because there are a lot of scenes where they like zoom out.
And you don't see his face. Yeah. He has long hair and you're almost like, is that because then they could have a stunt double come in?
Yeah. Which stands out in this movie because as much as we criticize this movie, a lot of the action scenes, it clearly is the actors doing it because they try and shoot it more up close. Yeah. Sometimes with too much of that shaky cam stuff that I hate, but yeah, just for those who don't know, like learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Royce Gracie is a huge deal. Yeah. Good for Nick Cage. I'm impressed.
So up next we have for first-person action sequences within Jiu-Jitsu, which as we stated, don't necessarily get handled well, but you would suspect that they were shot with like a GoPro or something, some sort of small camera would be used, but the team actually used what they called stripped down Aeroflex cameras. So this brought its own difficulties as performers still needed to complete their task despite the additional 16 pounds that they carried, which probably explains why maybe they were comfortable keeping the resolution the same and not showing their arms, because they probably couldn't move very much holding this camera. Yeah, really strange choice.
From an interview with director Dimitri Logothetis on Action Reloaded, Dimitri shared his martial arts background. He has 2 black belts, one in Tang Soo Do, another in Kempo Karate. For Tang Soo Do, he trained under 2-time world champion kickboxer Howard Jacks, and for Kempo, he trained under the founder of Kempo, Master Ed Parker, who occasionally trained celebrities. At 3 occasions, Dimitri Logothetis trained alongside Elvis Presley, which is a weirdly common thing where like a lot of Hollywood actors, specifically in the 60s and 70s, decided that karate was a thing to do. Like, what's his name? Doug Dillman trained like Muhammad Ali karate. George Dillman trained Muhammad Ali in karate, even though George Dillman, it's unknown if he actually has any martial arts ability of any kind.
It would be cool though if actors started going back to doing karate in their spare time instead of collecting like spirit stones and incense. But nowadays, I guess that's just where things are headed.
Well, like Jonah Hill is training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. A couple other people, like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is catching on because it's like it's good exercise and it's legitimately good self-defense martial art. So that's like weirdly catching on for whatever reason. So
why aren't actors learning drunken jiu-jitsu? What was it? Drunken the thing Jackie Chan made? Do you know that one?
Master, yeah.
Yeah, where like you're never actually drunk, but you move your body in a way that's drunken, and it like disorients your opponent because they're like I don't know what the heck he's gonna do.
Well, like the shame with the rise of mixed martial arts is it demystified the martial arts. Where for years, like martial arts was seen as this like mystical secret knowledge, or people are claiming like they could do the dim mak, they could do no touch knockouts, or they could do one punch like knockouts and stuff, or you can make someone's heart explode by touching them the right way, you know. And then with the rise of like actual competitive fighting, people realized, oh, none of that works. Like none of this, that you can't do that. You can't touch someone on the forehead and they'll fall backwards. There's no chi. There's no like, you know, a lot of stuff like Steven Seagal's martial art, Aikido, is basically completely ineffective at or like even like Wing Chun, like the stuff that Bruce Lee popularized, is impractical as a soul martial art. So like there's mysticism around it's gone. So a lot of Hollywood people don't train in karate and stuff anymore, which is kind of a shame because it's less fun.
Punching is way cooler than stones, so
that's anyway. True, Melvin. That should be our merch when we make t-shirts.
Punching is cooler than stones.
Let's have like complete nonsense phrases on our shirts. Complete word salad. Like,
on the back, it's like try and figure out what the front of my shirt means, and it's just something so dumb. In the same interview, Dimitri Logothetis also shared some of his filmmaking background, although he didn't share to what extent he performed in Martin Scorsese's New York, New York. We can, of course, assume it's probably as an extra. He worked on set at the time when writing a short story. Now, he says that Scorsese saw the work he was doing on the short story, requested to read it, and was then impressed by it. And then he recommended Dimitri enter film school, as well as wrote him a letter of recommendation. I mean, it's possible.
It's possible, yeah.
I only say that because this feels like, I mean, I'm not going to say it's disingenuous, but it's like, it's so specific and strange. And then also seeing this film, it's like, I don't know.
Well,
anecdotal.
It's anecdotal.
So it's cute.
It's a very cute story, and I want to believe it. And the part of the reason why is because I can imagine Scorsese does this for lots of people.
Yeah, he's a nice guy. You watch his interviews, and he's just such a genuine person.
I wouldn't believe it if he was like, yeah, and then he let me look at the script. I did an uncredited rewrite, and then I got to work on second. You know, that would be like, okay, whatever. But like Scorsese sees a guy as being creative and goes, you should go to film school. Like that, I could just, but like what we don't know is he did that for 50 other people on set, or he's just writing all these recommendations.
Right. And also like 30 years ago, 40 years ago at this point, because what, New York's like 1983 or something. So yeah.
It might turn out that he just has like a form letter he submits to schools and just changes the name.
That's cute.
One of my professors did that. He just writes a general recommendation letter, and then when kids ask him, he'll just change the name of the school and stuff.
Some people will even say, write your own recommendation letter, and then I'll just read it. And if I sign it off, it just means I agree with what you wrote about yourself. So it could be one of those two. I guess the only other trivia would literally be there's only 30 seconds, or like the specific amount of jujitsu in jujitsu.
There's 4 instances. There is Ricardo. What's his name? I have his name here. Ricardo Machado. There's a scene where Brax fights 2 guys at once, and then he does 30 seconds of grappling where he gets the guy in like an arm bar.
Yeah.
And Nick Cage goes for a heel hook in his fight, so that happens.
I saw that. That's right. He was.
Jake does a triangle choke and then an arm bar from his back, and that is all the jujitsu in the movie. Jake also does a Hurricane Rana, which is a wrestling move, like Rey Mysterio would do, which was hilarious. So. The best piece of trivia is the fact this is quote unquote based on a comic book. Did you look into that at all?
It's based on a comic book, but then it's like by the same author,
by the people
or the writer who wrote this, and it's a short comic book, so it's sort of the equivalent of like that's the outline. They just outlined with a comic book instead of like
storyboards and called it a comic book.
And they just called it a comic book, so it's cute.
Well, that's a thing people do. Like, do you remember Cowboys versus Aliens?
Jon Favreau, the Jon Favreau movie. Isn't that what, like, wasn't that a passion project too? He was like, I really wanted to do this for years or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, so it's like produced by Steven Spielberg, directed by Jon Favreau. It has this like insanely star-studded cast.
Daniel Craig during his like the pinnacle of Daniel Craig's career, because he just did like 2 Bond films, I think, or something. Yeah. So it was
Sam Rockwell's in the movie. Harrison Ford is in it as a grumpy cowboy, which I assume they just followed him around in real life with a camera and spliced it into the movie.
Yeah.
But apparently it says like, based on a comic, and they just made a comic so they could claim the movie is based on a comic. like it really felt kind of like that. Where do you remember that movie I'm Number 4?
Yeah.
Where like that came out of and I think you've actually worked for companies like this where it's just like a factory for books where they have like a general pen name and they give a bunch of authors writing and they're given strict outlines of what to write.
So I have a friend who's done stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, they basically say write this, and then you just every 3 months you're putting out a new book because they're saying this is what our data and metrics are telling us sells, and then they produce it through or distribute it through like Amazon, and most of them don't get a hardcover copy. So
yeah, so like the guy who wrote that book, A Million Little Pieces, where it turns out he made up his own life story. I don't know if you remember that whole fallout where he wrote a memoir claiming to have gone to like a psych hospital and met a girl and all that stuff. Turns out he made it all up. He started like a publishing company like that, specifically made to make young adult stories that would take off, kind of like Twilight books, and also with the intent to make them into franchises. And that movie I'm Number 4 is based on one of those books. So it's this whole cynical thing where it was like a company made by a liar meant to just produce hits to make movies, made a movie, and then no one liked it. So I don't think, but that's kind of the vibe I got where it's like, oh yeah, we made a comic, let's make this into a movie. And it's just like, yeah, it's like a short comic they made to adapt into a movie, which they're hoping that this would become a franchise.
I saw
they're hoping that this movie would spawn a whole franchise, which I just hope to God doesn't happen. So,
yeah, it wouldn't work. There's no way it would work. So it goes.
So it goes. So Melvin, what is the next section?
So we're moving into our in-depth discussion is what it's titled, but that's just the template. It just means we're going into spoilers, of which there's only one, and by what I'm assuming will be only a few more minutes of talking about this movie. There's really not much to dig into. It's not like this movie just solved geopolitical race relations or something. This is not the first trumpet sound of the coming of Christ, a return of Christ. So there's not a lot here, but we are moving into the, I guess, what we call spoilers, but you can tell by our voice that we're just going to jump right into this because we're not worried about ruining your experience.
Let me build it up. Do you want me to build it up?
What is there to build up? They didn't even build it up in the movie.
Well, like it revolves around a single person, Melvin, a man named Nicolas Cage, where, like I mentioned, 30 minutes of the movie, he finally shows up and he's like a kooky hermit who makes paper hats and he does backflips. And so he has this bizarre scene where he says a bunch of Nick Cagey things to our main character. And then the rest of the cast shows up. And for a brief moment, I thought it was going to be a thing where Nick Cage is in this guy's imagination because the editing of the scene is so bizarre where like the characters are clear, like Nick Cage is clearly not in the same room as them. And I thought that was an intentional decision by the filmmaker.
Yeah.
Like I thought they were purposely making it obvious to some people that he's not there with the characters. And it turns out Nick Cage just wasn't there the same day of filming, I guess, because then he just follows them around the rest of the movie and people talk to him. But so the whole movie, Nick Cage is talking to the characters, and I wouldn't say he's a pronounced interest in Jake, but he does have like a Yoda-like relationship with Jake where he's giving him advice, which to normal people, you read it as this guy wants this guy to beat the alien because he doesn't want the world to be destroyed.
Right.
But then Nick Cage has this awesome sword fight scene where he fights the alien with the sword, and the alien even shows him respect by like Nick Cage falls down and he picks up a sword and gives it back to Cage so he can keep fighting him. And then Nick Cage's character survives the fight. And then a problem in the movie is that scenes just end and then characters aren't seen for a minute, like 15 minutes, and they show up again. So I can't tell if people have died or not. Like I thought Tony Jaa was dead at one point and he just shows up back up in the movie.
Yes. Yeah. And he gives like an approving nod or no, a grunt. And it's very anime like where like he doesn't say anything except go like, and you're like, oh, okay. Like that's his character.
Oh, good. He's not dead. I guess I went for sequels. But like eventually Nick Cage's character dies. And then Melvin, I'll let you take it from here.
I cheered. I cheered because then they go back to some place and then JuJu Chan's character goes, he was your dad. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I put my arms up and Catherine wakes up because she fell asleep and she goes,
oh my God,
I missed something. What happened?
And the only thing happened.
I'm like, I'm so happy right now. Nick Cage was his dad. And she's like, oh, okay. And then she fell back asleep because this movie's boring and nothing happens.
My wife fell asleep during this movie too. So there you go.
So if your wife is just stressed and she needs to take you want her to take a nap because that's the way that as Christ you could love your wife, put this movie on and she'll get the best sleep of her life.
It's I really wish there's more to talk about, because that we do a show where we talk about movies, but also this movie is a video game. Like, I had this thought watching it where you get a cutscene that you don't pay attention to, and then you fight a bunch of enemies, and then you get another cutscene. Like, that is the format of this movie.
And there's the same, I didn't put this in, but the same interview with Dimitri Logothetis said like he wants to make it like a video game and he hopes video game fans like it. But it just doesn't work like
It doesn't.
that. First off, video games are made or are basically make or break it when it comes to their camera control. And this movie does not have good camera control. If he wants to make a good video game, he needs to let the camera stay a bit far away so I can focus on what's going on and press Y for counter when I need to. And they just couldn't, because I don't know who did the camera work for this movie, man. He just was having like, I don't know. It was just frustrating, man.
But there is one question which most people listening to this episode will care about, which I, obviously as a martial arts fan, that's the thing I was most interested in. But 90% of people that click on this will only have one question, and we've made them wait for so long, which is, how is Nicolas Cage this movie? Because that's what people want to know. They're here for the Nick Cage, man.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's not in a lot of this movie. He's in more of it than I thought he would be. Where it's a funny thing where like he is the biggest part of the poster, and the second biggest person on the poster is Tony Jaa, and then poor Alain Moussi, who's the actual star of the movie, is in like the bottom corner of the poster.
Yeah.
But Nick Cage is a supporting actor in this film, and he's okay. It's not like total phoned in performance. We know, like in
he never
Left
phones
Behind.
it in. Let's be real. He never phones it in.
Did you see the Left Behind movie he's in?
No, I didn't see that. Did he phone it in for that?
He's so bad. He's in a seat the whole movie. He's the pilot of the plane. So he's just sitting in the cockpit for like the entire movie, same facial expression, not reading any line, like barely doing anything. And there's a couple movies like
how are the performances for everyone else? Because if a director knows Nicolas Cage and uses him well, then typically he does well. I mean, he's director dependent. If he has a bad director, he's not going to do well.
I could definitely see that. But yeah, so it's like mid-level Cage, where he's having fun. He's the best actor in the movie by a very wide margin, simply by virtue of you feel like he's the only character in the movie,
right? Where
he has traits, he's quirks, he is Nick Cage, which does a lot in a movie like this. And I want to say, like, I'm tired of this Nick Cage slander out there, where people like to say he's a bad actor, and they like to say that he's just goofy and overreacts and whatever. I love Nick Cage, like unironically. I'm not one of those people who ironically enjoys him and thinks he's bad. He's good because he's bad. I think he's a really great actor. I love this recent turn where he's in lots of B movies, where he's become like a B movie star, movies like The Color Out of Space and Mandy and those types of movies. Even something like this, where no other big name actor would sign on for this. This movie's terrible. But Nick Cage was like, all right. He shows up and he gets to use a sword.
He's excited to use his martial arts.
And like, he's great. In like Roger Ebert said it best, where he's in good movies, he's a great asset. In bad movies, he's like indispensable or invaluable or something like that. Where I love Nick Cage. I think he's great. And he's okay in this. Definitely not worth the price of admission necessarily. But he's in like 30 minutes of this movie, I'd say, overall. So it's not one of those things where he just shows up for two scenes, clearly filmed on the same day, that they just splice in. He actually is in the movie. He follows the characters around. He has like actual scenes and conversations. And like I said, he's a sword fight with an alien. So, which I'm sure will show up on someone's like top 10 Nick Cage moments compilation or something at some point.
Yeah.
So Nick Cage, you get a decent amount of Cage. Yeah, Watch Mojo. And one of the 15 videos they'll put out today.
Top 10 Nick Cage freakouts.
Someone quoted Watch Mojo as like an actual source. They're like, no, dude, you don't understand. Like, I don't remember what it was, but it's like, just look up. He's like, go to YouTube and type this in. watch Mojo, top 10, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I am not doing that. That is not good. That is not proof of whatever argument we were having in the past. So.
Maybe Watch Mojo is the new Wikipedia, where a bunch of teachers are like, you can't go to Watch Mojo for this paper. If you source Watch Mojo, you made a mistake.
You need to source the sources Watch Mojo is using. That's a secret. I will say that the Wikipedia page for this movie is very clearly been edited by people involved with the movie, because if you go to the reception section, it's only positive reviews, even though this movie has overall negative reviews. So like the first line of the Wikipedia page is, oh, it's been slightly edited to be less obviously like positive, but it's only positive reviews in the Wikipedia page. So I think Dimitri Logothetis.
Toss ours on there. We're an official publication. Put us up on there.
Melvin, writing for the Cinematic Doctrine podcast, states,
this movie is hard to focus on. You will spend time thinking about other things more than thinking about the movie.
More punching, less rocks.
Yeah, more punching, less rocks. I love it. So, I mean, it's very clear we didn't like this movie, but we had to talk about it because you just had to. Every year, there's always one that you have to talk about, whether it's good or bad, or whether it inevitably becomes good or bad. You just have to. I guess like the next one this year, what might be, I was going to say Monster Hunter for like the necessary bad, but I don't know. It's tough when you get into December because everybody holds off for Oscar season, but then like that doesn't exist this year. So unless you're a streamer. So yeah, don't watch it. It's not fun. This was probably more entertaining to listen to than the movie. And it's also going to save you more time. And that's that.
Yeah, there's really not much to it. I kind of like the ending because they kind of kill the monster in a creative way, where in the movie it's established that he can heal, but you have a brief chance while he's healing. And so what they do is they cut him open, throw a grenade at him, and then he heals himself over the grenade so it blows up inside him. Or the main character does one final kick while screaming and kicks him back into the portal he came from, which simultaneously is a good monster kill, but he leaves it open for credits. Sequels. Also, the last shot of the movie is the actor who plays Crabman in My Name is Earl drinking some alcohol and then making a gross face. And that's the last shot of the movie, which is a really weird final shot for a movie.
And it turns into a comic panel.
Oh,
and then it fades away. We didn't even talk about that. They do title cards with comic panels. And like sometimes the comic panels have the people superimposed into it. And then other times it's an actual comic drawing. But it's really cute. I thought it was cute because it looks very like deviant art. It's so cute.
Also, the opening credits scene is just stills from the movie, just like filtered through like a comic book filter, which is an amazing low budget thing to do. But yeah, there really isn't anything here. There's some other comment I was going to make about it, which is, I mean, I wanted to like this movie so much because I love everything. All the ingredients here are things I like. I like science fiction. I like fighting. I like Nick Cage. I like weird ideas put on film, but like every idea in this movie is executed so poorly. The movie looks like they didn't do multiple takes it looks like they didn't do a second round of like reshoots because the movie's edited together really sloppily. Yeah. Where there's, like I said, characters will just exit scenes and then not show up for 20 or 30 minutes. Yeah, there's really not much here. It's just bad. It's kind of boring. And we just had to talk about it for some reason. Melvin messaged me where he was just like, I know you haven't been on the show in a while, but we're talking about this movie, right? And I was like, oh yeah, we're def talking about this movie. And we both paid to see it. We both rented it from separate people. So this movie got money out of both of us. And
we're here to tell you to not give it any more money. Don't do it.
It's just not worth it.
So it goes.
That's so it goes.
Thanks so much for checking out this episode on Jiu Jitsu. If you've seen Jiu Jitsu, what did you think of it? If you're listening on Cinematic Doctrine's website, let us know in the comments below or shoot us an email to cinematicdoctrine@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes, Podchaser, or wherever you listen. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And as mentioned before, Cinematic Doctrine has a Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you're opted into a once-a-month movie poll where you decide a movie we discuss in the podcast. You also gain access to the pre-show, a Patreon-exclusive podcast series where we casually talk movies, Christianity, and life itself. There are other unique benefits that come with supporting the podcast, so be sure to check that out at patreon.com/cinematic doctrine. A special shout out to those who support at the Art House Theater tier on Patreon. Thank you so much, Mom, Dad, Melanie, Shirleyana, and Thomas. You guys are the best, and your continued monetary support is greatly appreciated. All of this will be available in the show notes. Until next time, stay cool. Want some Cinematic Doctrine swag? You're in luck! We've got 3-inch Cinematic Doctrine logo stickers exclusive for Patreon supporters. Perfect for your travel mug or laptop. Head over to patreon.com/cinematic doctrine, link in the show notes, and choose the independent theater tier. Doing so will net you other perks too. But let's be real, the podcast stickers are the coolest perk. So get yourself some podcast stickers by supporting on Patreon.